How did the end of the Cold War lead to the invasion of Ukraine? To better understand what is going on in Ukraine today, we must understand what happened to Ukraine yesterday. In this speech, I will explain how the end of the Cold War led to the eventual invasion of Ukraine. Having an interest of this ongoing war in Ukraine, it's been best to better understand what led to this war. After Ukraine's independence in 1991, it wanted to move away from post-Soviet Russian influence and move to more of a Western European influence. Now that it had gained its independence from the USSR in 1991, it was free from the Soviet rule and influence. Ukraine now could decide on its own future. It felt Western European influence was its best choice to recover from post-Soviet rule. It was now free to explore capitalism, which it wanted to pursue. Trading globally was now possible, and now finally it could hold its own free elections. An existence without Russian influence was a better one. Ukraine, now being independent, knew eventually it was going to need protection and a military alliance to protect itself from future Russian aggression. Joining NATO was that answer. It had seen other post-Soviet states join NATO and saw what having that protection could provide for them. Russia, fearing that now Ukraine would go to the west and join the NATO alliance, understood NATO's policies. So in 2014, Russian forces invaded the peninsula of Crimea, knowing that now that since a nation at war with a foreign power in its territory, it cannot join NATO. Russia's feelings toward Ukraine or any other nation moving towards NATO was always apparent. As stated by David Lane of Emmanuel University of Cambridge, stated, Gorbachev had offered unconditional removal of Soviet military forces from Eastern Europe. In return for agreeing to unify Germany, once he had received a promise from Western negotiators that NATO would not move 1 inch to the east. With Russia now controlling the Crimean Peninsula and having Ukrainian citizens now under its control, it had hoped to spread its influence and to also spread why it was the better choice. But as stated by Jerry Mankoff, senior associate of the Europe-Russia-Eurasia program, to Moscow's surprise and frustration, however, the Crimean playbook had limited success in other parts of the country. Ukraine had given Russia its answer. It did not want its influence by Russia. Now Russia knows that it cannot win the hearts and minds of the Ukrainians. So in February of 2022, Russia invades mainland Ukraine. Its goals? To create a buffer state between its own borders and NATO nations. To once again utilize Ukraine's rich resources. It was expected to fall in just a few weeks, a larger nation taking on a smaller one. But it didn't. With strong defense and its refusal to fight on has inspired the world. Ukraine received military aid and assistance and training from other nations. It has held the line and is now draining Russia of men and material. But with this David and Goliath task ahead of it, it will need continued help. In closing, I hope that I gave everyone a little more insight on this complicated matter. Ukraine's wanting to break away from Russian influence and the hold that Russia has held on Ukraine over the decades, and for the chance for the Ukrainian people, to think for themselves and to exist in the world is their goal. We have seen Ukrainian resolve, the willingness to fight an enemy much more in number than themselves. Haven't they earned the right for independence? Ukraine has paid its debt, and Ukraine has suffered under Russia's rule for a long time, and a people of a rich history finally deserve their say in the world and finally get their right to exist without fear of another nation obstructing that.